Live from the Business RadioX studio in Atlanta, it's time for Dental Business Radio, brought to you by Practice Quotient. Practice Quotient bridges the gap between the provider and payer communities. Now here's your host, Patrick O'Rourke.
Hi there, friends of the dental business community. This is your host, Patrick O'Rourke. Thank you for joining us today. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Practice Quotient, PPO analysis and negotiation, national firm that specializes in strategic guidance on PPOs, DHMOs, EPOs. If you're a top-tier provider and you are not getting top-tier compensation from your business partners, i.e. the insurance companies, then you should call the fine people at Practice Quotient. Mention Dental Business Radio. The finance department over there can be sticklers, and they're sponsoring the show and paying good coin for it. So mention Dental Business Radio when you call or you email them at info@practicequotient.com. I thank you. And so does our producer, who's also with us, John Ray. So thank you, John Ray. And on the show, I'm super excited to have Chris Sands. Chris Sands, how are you?
I'm awesome, Patrick. So excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to have you here because we get to talk about money because we're from the same world.
That's right.
Yes. So I know Chris Sands and what you do, but our listeners may not. So why don't you just introduce yourself and your organization?
So thank you for that, Patrick. Chris Sands, and I'm co-founder of Profi 2020 CPAs. We're a dental CPA firm, also nationally recognized, with us currently serving over 300 dental practices in 42 states. Mm-hmm. And built that firm out of my own frustrations. Really, my story is I come from dentistry. I worked in a dental practice really in the beginning voluntarily just to learn the business. Worked in one for 3 years, tripled it in size, grew it from 600,000 to 1.7 million in just under 3 years. Learned a whole lot, did everything non-clinical in that business, and got very frustrated with the different CPAs we used. Mm-hmm. Had 3 different CPAs in those 3 years, 2 of them being marketed as dental, and they didn't know our business. So I learned that really we had to teach accountants the dental business, not teach the dentists the accounting business.
Oh yeah, where you like count from Sesame Street, 1, 2, 3.
I was probably more scruffaluffagus,
Yeah.
I can't do an impression though.
That one's hard to do. Yeah.
Or what was the guy in the garbage pail?
Oh yeah, I should know that. Oscar,
Ray. That's right.
John Ray hangs out with Oscar sometimes. They're pals. They hang out on that side of town. Yeah. So you're dealing with some folks, and I will say that there is a lot of like dental stuff. We're the dental thing, whatever, XYZ. I've also learned as I've gotten, from corporate insurance company world into this niche. And that's kind of what this show is really about, is exploring the different fascinating parts of this business niche. So, continue. So you're, teaching your business part of it, to the accountants, and then what? So you're blowing up that particular dental practice as the business manager.
Are we blowing it up as the business manager?
No. Let's go back in the day, right, to where you were at that office.
Right.
And so you're working there and you can't get your numbers, I guess, right? From the CPA.
Could not get them on time, and they're always like 3-4 months behind.
Oh yeah. I hate that.
It was terrible.
You got to get a good bookkeeper.
Well, I tell you, that was one of the premises was, we created a company guarantee. The very first thing we thought of was we're going to guarantee financials by the 15th of the month or they're free.
Really?
Yep.
I like that.
It keeps us accountable. And I'll be honest with you, I learned the accounting business from just doing the same way I did dentistry. And accountants deal with deadlines. They know their filing deadlines. Mm-hmm. They don't like a monthly deadline. And it's an internal guardrail for us. And it really, that has really been one of the differentiating factors. And we have really no competition out there that does that.
I have not heard of that. And I dig it because I'm a numbers person myself.
And I hope that makes everyone else in the accounting industry do it. They really should.
Right. Well, our accountant is my business partner and he's pretty stickler for details. So I'm going to assume that that's all done. Right, Scott? So you were building, so you learned about dentistry from the inside out. All right. So you're not just, looking through the glass, and you started Profi. Profi, is headquartered also here in the greater Atlanta, Georgia area. All right. Where the straw stirs the drink, right? Really. And you have clients all over the place. And you're in Suwanee. And tell me about the why. What is everybody, why do they come to you, and why do they stay with you?
So they don't come to us just to get their stuff filed. We're typically not somebody's first CPA, to be honest with you, first accounting firm. Typically they come to us after they've experienced some sort of pain, typically in the form of a tax surprise. Let's say they get a $50,000 surprise, and I'm doing my air quotes right now.
Right. Yeah, I can see your
and
surprise.
And sometimes that's on the business owners. It's their fault. Sometimes it's the accountant's fault. But really, I think I can say that, speak freely, is that in general, people that are in accounting, people that are in accounting are not that great at communication, not that great at forward thinking, not that great at being proactive. And that's just because the nature of what they do is reactive. Okay, looking at past data. We used to have a joke to say that the accountants come in and count the bodies after the war is over. and that's what we're trying to change.
Right. I like that. If you have some familiarity in the insurance business, I think you have an insurance license, right? Have you ever heard the joke that, the old insurance joke that how insurance works, if it was a car, is you have the sales executive that's in the driver's seat and he's got his foot on the pedal and it's all the way to the floor. And the passenger seat, riding shotgun, is the underwriter who's got his foot also, crossed over firmly on the brake pedal all the way down. And in the back seat, you have the actuary who's looking out the rear view window and he's trying to figure out what just happened. And that's how it works. And it's funny because it's true. And so I like the dead bodies analogy. And you and your team there have a pretty broad experience with other parts of the financial segments too, right? Like you have an insurance license, so that's important, right? So are you looking at risk in, filling those other gaps for the clients, or what?
Yeah, I like to think that we're really using accounting as just data. And I often tell people that work in our firm that we're a data company, and we need to take that data and look at their entire picture of everything they're doing. And we're not just there to do the accounting and give them reports. We're there to use that information to provide them advice on here's some symptoms that these numbers tell us. We don't know. We may not know the exact cause. We may have a list of 3 to 5 things that could be causing it. And I've trained our accounting managers on enough dental practice management knowledge to be dangerous. And they'll give, here's some potential causes for this, doctor. Now you need to go back and investigate in your practice these things, look in your practice management data. Sometimes that's pointing them to a third party, either a representative like you that can help them in the area of the insurance reimbursements, or it could be any kind of consultant or coach.
Sure.
We're not everything to all people.
Mm-hmm.
We just, again, we see the symptoms, identify them, bring them up, hopefully sooner than they would have been brought up if they didn't have a relationship with us.
Right. I like that. You nailed it right on the head. Know enough to be dangerous, so it's what we do, or what I do. I just say this all the time. I do one thing and one thing only, and I'm really good at it. I'd like to think, right? People pay me for it. I'm not really good at anything else. Nothing. Like, I can cook okay, but nothing else. And so, but I've been around and I've seen enough challenges that pop up that are common, and it's almost like crowdsourcing, and you're like, yep, saw that. And so then you need to make sure that you have the right people to then, that you trust, that you're going to put your name on, because you want to help the client, because ultimately they need to be successful, and it's like a business partnership, right? And so you want them to be stress free, and they did not go to, business school. frankly. And so they need people that they can trust, that know how to do math, that can point things out, and not just in the rear view, especially these days.
Well, and I think too, that's a constant part of our job, is to provide that education. If you think about, if I was any good at science, which I was terrible at science.
Me too.
Knowing what I know about dentistry, I might be a dentist, because I think I could do well in the business. Now, would I do well clinically? Who knows? But I couldn't get past the science. And one of my early friends was a young dentist, and he told me that. He said, "Hey man, look, we grew up on opposite sides of campus in college.
Right.
I stayed as far away from the science side as I could, and he got no exposure to the business side. He's like, you're speaking a different language to me, and you don't even know it." So a big part of what we do in the world of accounting is trying not to speak accounting lingo, and creating either scenarios or creating examples or analogies.
I love analogies.
They can understand in dentistry.
Yes, absolutely.
The easiest one, the one that we use the most, is that their financials it's like the financial X-ray of their business. And you wouldn't, as a doctor, go and perform a procedure on a patient without taking an X-ray, because that would be malpractice. Mm-hmm. You know how many business owners are out there performing malpractice on their own business every day because they have no earthly idea what the finances look like? We do.
But yeah, and it's one of, sometimes I hear, excuse me, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been doing the insurance for 20 years, Patrick. And I'm like, really? I've been driving a car for 20 years too. It doesn't mean I can pull the transmission out and put it back in successfully. And then I feel like that's not even good enough. You have to then take it into a more clinical aspect so you can get right into the language that the people are used to. And then I say, all right, Betty, you've been working in a dental practice for 20 years too. Can you go back there and do a root canal? Nope. And they're like, that's crazy. I'm like, right. So I'm with you. There's different languages, I think, in any industry. And when you're trying to articulate what can be complex ideas, analogies and stories work really, really well. What other analogies pop up all the time?
Well, I think, sometimes people there's another saying we have about accountants, okay, that can be said, is that a lot of times accountants know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And that can be said for a lot of people, not just accountants.
I agree.
And, one of the first things when we're at any kind of, you and I both go to a lot of different shows where we have booths and things like that, and doctors come up and speak to us. And as they're coming up, they go, "Oh, you're a CPA firm. I've got a CPA." "Yeah, I hope you do." "Why'd you come up to the booth?"
Right.
And there is inevitably something going on in their mind, or something going on that they're not feeling that level of satisfaction because they don't, truth be told, they don't understand what's going on. They have somebody, but whatever their problem is, they don't fully understand it either. It's not being translated to them. Mm-hmm. And so they first come up and they're trying to figure out, like, are you the same as who I have? How are you different? And, straight up, what are your costs? What are your fees? And I turn around, or, if they really, really want some sort of made up fee to tell them up front, I say, well, what do you charge for a crown? That is way too much. Right?
I like that. I'm totally appropriating it.
And then I go, well, I'm talking on the fly with them. Couldn't I get a filling? And isn't that really the same as a crown? Well, yeah, but, well, can you guarantee it? Will it last as long? And, you can get the filling, let's say, for $400. You can get the crown for $1,200. The filling's going to fail. And when it fails, you'll have to come back. You won't know it's failed until you have pain. By the time you have pain, it's too late. And then you'll probably need a root canal. How much is the root canal? $1,400. And so then you'll be in for the filling for $400. You'll be in for the root canal for $1,400. And then you have to get a crown put on it anyway. Or we could just do the crown today. And that's the way I learned to speak in dentistry. First, when just explaining to a regular, I don't even call them patients; they're just people. Just explaining to a regular person how that's going to. Here's your options. You can either go the cheap route and you'll be back, and it'll end up costing you more in the long term, or you can just solve this today. Mm. And it's similar in everything we all do.
I agree.
So same thing in accounting. I give that, sometimes that analogy comes up pretty frequently at the booth. Mm-hmm. Where I tell them, look, what are you looking for? Are you looking for the cheap alternative? I can help you do that. Or are you looking to solve the problem? Mm-hmm. Or are you looking for the relationship? And it took me a while of more frustration in the accounting business to finally go back to my undergrad accounting 101 class, which I was not great at, to be honest with you. And I remembered that there were these different types of accounting. Mm-hmm. This is like really, really boring, exciting, boring stuff. Right?
I dig it. Keep going.
Well, it turns out that 99% of people, what they have in their relationship is called a financial accountant, which is nothing more than a compliance relationship. Help them file their returns, get the basics done. Mm-hmm. What everybody describes that they want is an actual advisory relationship, somebody that can explain their numbers to them, somebody that can teach them about their business, talk to them about their goals, give them some sort of advice or action items to move toward those goals. Well, all of that falls under this other category of something called managerial accounting. So once I stumbled upon that again, I was like, that's what we are. And that's something I think everybody should research. And when they go to sign up with an accounting relationship, they got to ask, how much is it? What do I get for it? What kind of relationship is this? And where is it promised? And the only way I could figure out to solve that problem and to create what everybody wanted was I said, okay, we're going to be month to month. Mm-hmm. We're going to see the whole scope of your life, your work, your business, your personal life, everything that's involved on the accounting side. We'll quote you a fixed monthly fee after we've seen the x-ray.
Right.
Okay. And if we don't hold up our end of the bargain, you can cancel us anytime. Month to month. Mm-hmm. Monthly guarantee, financials delivered by the 15th. At minimum, you're required to participate in quarterly phone calls, coaching calls on your finances. Mm-hmm. And that was a saying that we came up with, and that you cannot simply receive managerial accounting; you must participate in it.
I like that. Love it.
And I got to hold the doctors accountable. Mm-hmm. They like to play this game of I want to know, but I really don't want to know. Like I want my finances to be better, but I really don't want to have to know about it and think about it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to spend my lunch hour talking about numbers.
I want to stay primarily in the back office doing the clinical side. And they know in their brain how a dental activity translates to $1. Mm-hmm. But they don't know what happens with the dollar after that a lot of times. And so that's where we fill that void. And to challenge them and give them action items that they have to come back with, and for them to be engaged and participate in their finances. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for all business owners, really as a business owner myself, and I'm sure for you, right? Don't you have, for me, it's small. I have a very small, tight, kind of board of advisors, if you will. But I think on a very basic level, you have to have a holy trinity of your finance guy, your CPA. You need very good legal advice. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And the third is almost a mentor or somebody that's experienced in business and understands you and your personality that you trust implicitly. You need a bare minimum those. And it sounds to me like you guys are filling that role. I like the mandatory, and I like the month to month a lot. Because that way they're making a commitment to you. I think too often, and I'm probably guilty of this sometimes too, is I just want that done. I don't explain it to me. Just make it happen. Right. But right. You can't do that with the numbers, with the financials. Right.
Yeah. There are some, we, just like any other business and just like any dental practice, we evaluate our clients and evaluate, I think every practice should evaluate their patients. And, if someone is not willing to engage and they're not willing to personally, go through a process of change themselves, they're not ready for what we're offering.
Mm-hmm.
And you can certainly find a dozen or more than you can certainly find plenty of the financial accounting, compliance, relationships. I mean, it's
all right. Transactional. Let's call it transactional. All right. So do you want a transaction or do you want an advisor? I like that a lot. I think, there's a lot of parallels in our world. And for some reason, what you just said, it put Shawshank Redemption in my head, right? Which is one of my favorite movies ever. And there's a scene where, Red's like, why do you do all that stuff to Andy Dufresne? And Andy says, Red, you either get busy living or you get busy dying. Love that. Say it to my son sometimes. He looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, you'll understand one day.
That's another, that's another point on our client avatar list. What we design as our ideal client. Mm-hmm. Almost point number one is probably you have to be growth oriented. Mm-hmm. You're either growing or you're dying. That is the mentality. Mm-hmm. And there are some people that's not what they want. They want to stay in a comfort zone. They want to stay even keel where they're at. They're not looking for improvement.
Yeah. It's, I think that there's two types of growth. You can be too rapid. Certainly these days, if I have $1 for every time we're going to buy 40 practices in the next year. Really? Okay. Mm-hmm. And some of them do it. And then it's like the dog that just chasing a car, right? And then they catch the car and you're like, oh, how do you transition? That is not transactional. We'll get to that in a second because I want to hear your thoughts. But before I forget, and feel free to appropriate this. So Practice Quotient doesn't have a sales team, just so everybody.
I'm looking at it.
Right. And it's not even me, you're talking, we've divided because we're all over the country. But you are talking to leadership. It's either me or Scott, who sounds just like me. But he's not as funny as me. Or Nikki, who is, our director of operations, who's been with us forever. Great job, Nikki. Shout out to you. Anyways, so they probably wouldn't say this, but I'd say this. They're like, oh, how much does it cost? And I go, look, Doc, here's the deal. That's the wrong question. And they're like, huh? I'm like, the question is, Patrick, how much money are you going to make me? It is not, Patrick, how much money does it cost? That's just the wrong question. Does that make sense to you?
Exactly. I mean, I think if all you're looking for is somebody to do the bare minimum, that's just it's a mindset that we all have to go through, a mind shift that we all have to go through. Of there's cost is what you end up paying, but value is what you get.
I like that. Yeah.
And what value is there in forming a relationship with you? What value, Doc, are you seeking?
Mm-hmm. Let's define the objectives. It's not my objectives. It's your objectives. And so where do you want to go and can we help you get there? Right. That's really what you're articulating to the, prospective and probably current clients. Cause sometimes you have to remind them of the objectives that you set at the beginning. And occasionally you have to recalibrate like last year, which hopefully, won't happen again.
And Patrick, an expense is $1 that doesn't come back to you. Okay. An investment is where you get more than $1 back.
I'm totally appropriating that.
Okay.
I love that right there.
And so that's what, are you looking at whatever we're talking about? Are you looking at me or are you looking at this as another expense that you're going to have to add? Or are you looking at this as an investment in your business that you're going to get a return on and get some growth, get some more profit, more money in your pocket?
Love it.
Whatever it may be.
Right. Absolutely. I am picking up what you're putting down, Chris Sands. John Ray's over there. He's coloring his coloring book. That's all right. At least he's got a book. So what's new and exciting? Like when you got back from the holiday this weekend, you're like, all right, second half of the year, baby, it's on. What are you excited about right now?
Well, I'm excited that, I think one thing that we've put a focus on is, everyone is concerned about what the future holds in terms of our economy, in terms of interest rates, in terms of the market being high and all of that. And so who knows? I'm not here with a glass ball or anything, crystal ball to tell you what the future holds. However, you deal with the cards that you have right now. And we made a proactive choice to look at all of our clients, all their debt schedules, and to say, hey, we put a formula together on terms of what their interest rates were, what their payments were, and said, this is the time to now go out to the banking industry and lock in lower rates if you can. So that's like what's immediately in front of us. If you're just asking my personal opinion, I am potentially, I think we've gone through a storm. We might be in the eye of the storm. There could be a storm surge coming. We've been in historically low interest rates since the 2007, 2008 recession. And we've been saying that ever since then. It's got to go up. Don't know when, don't know how much, but interest rates went down again, after the COVID experience. And so we're pushing all clients, hey, we as an accounting firm have your financials bank ready at all times. Use them.
Mm-hmm.
And go out there and push your existing relationships, but go out there and also seek out maybe some new relationships to see what kind of competitive advantages you can get within the banking industry on your debts. We're big proponents of paying off debt, getting rid of it. It creates phantom tax. It's unnecessary interest. And we use that opportunity to tell them, hey, restructure, consolidate your debt. Any cash flow that you save, we're not going to change the cash flow. You're going to use that as extra to pay down your debt. Mm-hmm. So debt, in my mind, is risk. And my underlying degree and why we kind of cross paths too is that my underlying degree was in risk management. Mm-hmm. I was actually trained to be an underwriter, an actuary, but couldn't sit at the desk all day.
It's boring.
And debt elimination is one of our focuses with every single client. And I think that's different. In all the accounting relationships I had prior, they never brought it up. They just stated it. Here's your balances.
Yeah, you got to attack that. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing I think right now there's urgency on is we've had plenty of clients that are, I'd say the average interest rate that we saw that they locked in a few years ago was around 5.5. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing even below 3% interest rates on business loans and real estate loans. The other hot topic is that's happening in all of the dental Facebook groups and discussion groups is should we be paying our associates and our hygienists as 1099 independent contractors or as W-2 employees? Quite frankly, I'm shocked that question's happening now because when they went through COVID and they had to get PPP loans, anybody that was a 1099 contractor was not covered and did not get a check from the dental practice after they got their PPP money. Mm-hmm. A lot of those associates, some of them had their own entities. They had to go out and apply separately for PPP money, and they were upset at their practice for not covering them. However, sometimes it was a mutual choice between the practice and the associate doctor.
Sure, I see it all the time.
Going as 1099, doing their own expenses, thinking they're saving a ton of money. Well, it's actually more black and white than people think it is. They say here everybody else is doing it. I know plenty of people that are doing it, and that doesn't mean it's right or allowed or legal. But there's a lot of information. If you just Google on your own, you can find plenty of articles coming out, plenty of announcements directly from the IRS, directly from the Department of Labor, and they are going to be going after all businesses that they feel are misclassifying employees, and dentistry is on the target list.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is when Uncle Sam needs some money, they're going to go shake the trees and look underneath the cushions of the couch and take the really low-hanging fruit, which is easy to prove, easy to find out, and that's the 1099 contractors. We get that question sometimes, but I always defer to, I'm like, you got to talk to your tax advisor, tax or legal. We don't dispense tax or legal advice. We do get that question quite a bit, particularly with growth and particularly with temps and then how it ties into credentialing. And I'm not going to talk about credentialing because it's awful and makes me want to claw my eyes out. Truth on the show. That's all you get. And so the 1099 contractors down in some states like Jersey, they don't give you an out or what would be considered a gray area in a lot of the country. They're like, the answer is no. if they walk in there and do one thing, they're W-2, right? That's how they do it in New Jersey, but most states it's not. And so you see it with temps, you see it with specialists that come in, but you also see it a lot with just regular full-time docs, right?
You see it the most with the regular full-time docs. And sometimes, here's the craziest part. Maybe they have more than one associate doctor working there, and one of them is paid on W-2 and the other one is paid on 1099. How do you justify that?
I don't know.
You can't. They have the same occupation, and you're misclassifying them. There's no protections for the 1099 contractor. But the real deal is that there is a 20-point checklist, okay, that the IRS and the Department of Labor have, and there are probably 4 to 5 questions on this checklist that all deal with the element of control. Who controls the schedule? Do they tell you where you have to be? Do they tell you which patients you're going to see? Who controls or supplies the instruments and different supplies? And if that is all one employer, if the 1099 contractor does not show up and say when they want to show up, if they do not bring their own materials and tools, then they're not a contractor. They're an employee. Mm-hmm. And the checklist pretty much ends there. Almost nowhere in dentistry can they pass that test of control.
Mm-hmm. So, would you have a link to that checklist on your website?
I have an entire document that has resources from IRS, Department of Labor, CPA resources, legal resources, Cedar HR Solutions resources, that has all kinds of these links. Now, we need to post it on our website. You just gave me a task for today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. But you can Google that. You can Google IRS 20-point checklist. You can Google 1099 contractor versus employee checklist.
Well, listen, Google can be very difficult sometimes. All right. And so, dear listeners, as a favor to you, what we will do is when he accomplishes that task, we will put it into the show notes. So if you are on your phone, you can just click on the link and it will take you right to what Chris just described, because the more you know. So, because you don't want Uncle Sam or the state come knocking on your door. All right. They're looking for more than coffee. So I don't know this. What's the penalty? So let's say, I'm a doc and I've got one associate and it's misclassified. Like, what happens? What are they going to do? Are they going to take me out front and beat me, or how much money are they going to take?
So we have these legal Ponzi schemes in this country called Social Security and Medicare.
Oh yeah. I'm familiar with them.
And that's what we're talking about here.
We should rant on that one day. We'll just do a whole show on why this is silly and stop talking about Medicare or single payer for all when we already have it and they can't run it. Sorry.
Those systems are virtually bankrupt. And
why can't we just give it to everybody?
Yeah, let's not go down that path. But that's what they're looking to capture here. And if you are found to have misclassified an employee, and the majority of the liability is going to be on the employer side. So it's the dental practice that carries the risk.
That's who has the money.
And they're going to say, how long have you been doing this? And let's go back and reclassify all of this as W-2 wages. And what would the Medicare and Social Security, the FICA tax?
So they're going to go out. They want the FICA and a penalty, probably, right?
Plus penalties, plus interest. And there will be some on the contractor's side as well, that doctor or hygienist. But the majority of that risk is on the business owner. And they can go back as far as they want to go.
Really? It's no statute, huh? Yeah.
So payroll taxes is not a joke. And that's essentially where everybody's kind of cheating. They think, I'm saving 3%, 3.5% by paying them as a contractor. And the government's going, no, you're cheating us.
Right. And I think that's how they got Al Capone, isn't it?
That's always the way they get anyone. Tax evasion. Oh yeah.
So that's really important knowledge. And so I've been kind of given the alert like HIPAA police, but I think that by and large, at least most of our clients who tend to be more established docs, with good staffs and good practice managers. Shout out to all of you. That's not an issue, but this one here, and you just hit it because I didn't know. Again, I don't delve into this a lot. So the motivation here, if I'm hearing you correctly, for the business, the practice, is to save FICA. So you're saving 3.5 maybe?
Yeah. So, FICA is
yeah, I know
it's in general. Okay. It's around 7% now, depending on the incomes.
Yes.
But, half is the employer and half is the employee side. So they figure they're saving.
Right. 3.5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Not worth it. The old analogy about fighting City Hall, or I fought the law and the law won.
Well,
John Ray has that tattooed on his back.
You and I playing in the entire market of dentistry, we play a little bit and we encounter DSOs, right? And I think that if it's an established DSO as a private practice, you got to ask, would the DSO be doing this? And one of the biggest deals with DSOs, because they are so heavily challenged and regulated in their states, is compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't fool around with that. They have to stay compliant.
Well, they usually have a compliance officer too.
So it's in a true established DSO, it's not a question. Everybody's W-2. Why all of a sudden in private practice is it, we have the liberty to do this a different way?
Because I read it on Facebook, Chris.
And it's not getting your advice from other dentists on Facebook.
Thank you. Preach the gospel, Chris Sands, brother Chris Sands, Deacon Sands up in here. Please do not get all of your news and your business counsel from Facebook memes or Facebook groups. They're not super secret either, by the way. Pretty easy to find out. This is one of the things I talk about all the time. I wasn't on Facebook until recently. Now I get on there, and every time I don't get on there a lot. And when I do, I just feel like I lose 3 hours of my life because I'm like, no, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. And I'm like, I could just sit here all day long, but I really feel like what's the polite word? Or there's got to be another saying, but you're taking a bio break in the wind. Right. There you go. I don't want the FCC. John Ray says, don't worry about it, but he says that about a lot of things, and look where it's got him, tattooed up, missing a couple fingers, eye patch, driving around a broken down purple Corvette, thinking it's cool. Yuck mouth. I'm just playing, John Ray. I love you. So let's transition. Since you brought up DSOs, you brought up growth. All right. So if your clients are growing, all right. So our clients tend to be growing too, at various trajectories. And one of the questions that we get frequently, and that we talk to the attorneys and the tax advisors, and let me just preface this by going, my opinion is never a substitute for qualified legal counsel that's licensed to practice law in your state, and or your tax professional that is licensed appropriately.
Can I just say ditto so I don't have to say all that?
Yeah.
Same goes for me.
Yeah, there you go. We're like peas in a pod, dude. And so, they're like, okay, well, should we create another entity for the practice location, or do we need to split out our disciplines? Maybe we're going to do specialty. So I have my own commentary, but all of my advice is really exclusively to the contracting.
But you know what the standard legal and tax reply to a question like that is, right?
No.
It depends.
The answer is it varies. Yes. So do you have any other? Yeah, because you're right. It does kind of vary on what they're trying to achieve and how much money they're talking about, how much they want to protect the risk that's involved.
Let me give you can I give my general opinion here?
Please.
Okay. So in general, I think, that if you have multiple locations, okay, we're not talking about if you're a full established legal DSO, or you just are private, if you're privately held, privately owned, multi-location practice. I think it's very helpful to have every different location in its own entity. Let me also say that there is a lot of confusion amongst doctors between the difference. There's a legal entity, which the attorney helps you decide what that legal entity should be in your state for protection. Then you have a choice on that, how that legal entity gets filed for taxes. So I'll ask them, what kind of entity do you have? Well, I have an LLC, but it could be an LLC that's filing as an S corporation. Okay. So the legal entity and the tax filing are two separate things. And there's a lot of confusion around that in dentistry. So the attorney will help you decide which legal entity to file. And I believe they should all be separate. And most attorneys will agree, because just from protection standpoint, if you can have, if there was any kind of malpractice or any kind of lawsuit in one, it keeps the others protected and separated. From an accounting standpoint and general business, I think, if you have multiple locations, you should always be prepared that maybe one is not working out that well for you and maybe you want to cut it loose. Mm-hmm. And if you're commingling all of the finances for those, it's very difficult to sell it, because you're trying to separate it out and sell it. You need to keep it separate from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So I believe in having separate legal entities and separate tax filings for each practice location. There are exceptions, and a lot of times people come to us and they've already got 2 or 3 in one tax filing, and it's too difficult to unwind, and we just leave it alone.
That's why you can't sell it.
Yep, just leave it alone. But that's my opinion.
Right.
And then we get those questions around what should I have a management company? First of all, let me tell you that a management company itself does not save you anything in taxes. A management company is about scaling. It's about consolidating the non-clinical services so that you can create more profit margin. Okay, and having one centralized phone center to answer the calls, take the phones off the front desk, and schedule all the appointments for all the offices in one place. Having one centralized marketing department that's marketing for all the locations, and they're either same brand or different brands. Having centralized insurance, processing, insurance,
verification, credentialing, all of that stuff, which you should do on your.
So the management company is about efficiency. My opinion on that too is that you don't really need one unless you have 3 or more locations. That's out of just personal experience doing that.
Right. Yeah. Amen.
So those things cost money to get started too, in terms of people, everyone hears about the call center and they get excited. That the call center is an undertaking, but once it's in place.
In running them, as somebody who's done it, all right, on a very large scale, it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's really not. And you need to it's not just about finding the butts in the seats that are trained, but you need to get trainers, and then you need to get leadership in there. Right. It is not transactional, at all. And so it's a whole nother, undertaking. And that's where I feel like sometimes people have the best intentions but they don't surround themselves with the right people, or they don't want to, compensate real professionals to do a real professional job. And it's my take. And you're nodding your head and you're like, preach on, Brother Patrick. So I like that decentralized. See, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking
it's to centralize service and build, economies of scale.
Right. So and this is really for our listeners and maybe for you. I totally agree with everything that you said. Now, again, what's the disadvantage from a contracting standpoint? Because the advantages and disadvantages actually are there. It's a wash. It's a total wash. Now from a contracting standpoint, if you have one tax ID and you're in one state and you're one discipline being general dentistry, oral surgery, or periodontist for those listeners who are not in the clinical area, and you have one tax ID and you have partnerships, I still agree with you on that. You should mind the numbers on each location, right? But if it's already set up that way, it's easier to contract. So it's just faster because you have one tax ID. It's already established. Every time you set up a new entity, that's a new legal business entity. And this is what people do not, for some reason, or at least the hundreds of people that I've spoken to over the past several years, you have a new legal business entity that has to sign new legal contracts for network participation. So that tax ID number is not going to be recognized on claim forms, right? So you're going to have cash flow disruption. Is claims disruption, network participation disruption. And one of the trends that's happening right now is that there's a labor shortage all across the world, and the insurance industry is not immune to it. And credentialing has never been what I would call fast. Fast in credentialing is 3 months. Right now everything's backed up because of COVID and because of labor shortages. And so that's where folks are like, well, we built the practice and we opened it last week. So we need to we need to be in network, make that happen. I'm like, look, doc, this is not like flipping a light switch at all. You should have called me a year ago. And so, and I'll be very candid. We tend to sidestep those. And so listeners, just so you know, I give you the best advice that I can, but I'm like, you're in a world of, you want it done fast or do you want it done right? Because if you just want to get in all the networks as fast as possible, buddy, you better just start credentialing,
It's that old saying, you want it done cheap, fast, or right. You only get to pick two.
Right. And so, but no, you can't go analyze, because if you really think about it, where's your leverage? You're saying, Hey, Mr. Insurance Company. Hey, listen, do me a favor. I really need to get these contracts in really fast. My credentialing apps, I need them in real fast because I don't want to have any claims issues and we need new patients over here. Do me a favor. Would you please get me in? And so while you're saying that, it's very difficult to be like, oh, by the way, buddy, your fees are awful. These suck. We're not taking this crap. Huh? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense. And by the way, you know who knows all this? The other side, all of my colleagues in the insurance world, right. They're waiting. They understand all of this. They know that it's a new tax ID. And so it has to be planned, but it's not fun. In the credentialing in particular. And by the way, nobody likes it. The insurance companies aren't making you do that. It's mandated by state law. So,
and let me say, and I know you know this to be true, Patrick, you get some advice, you hear these advice from the different advisors and their specialty, and whether it's the attorney or the accountant, and they're telling you, hey, you should switch the entity, and that could switch a tax ID number. And then all of a sudden your reimbursement rates change.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
And that happens a lot. That's something that, every now and then a new client will come to us and they've said, I've been told for years and years, I need to, convert to an S Corp. Okay. Can you? Is there a tax consequence? So in our world, we look at that first. Let's say that we're all good there, but we're like, you still may not want to do that because maybe you have a certain reimbursement rate with one company, and if you switch, they're going to bump you down, and it's like a 40% haircut.
Yeah.
Financially speaking, that might not be worth it.
Yeah, rhymes with schmelta.
Yeah. So it's a pain. It's a lot to look at. There's no.
That's what you just described as one of the biggest challenges in this industry right now. For me, it's not by me. I mean the entire provider community in this country, and then nobody tells them. And I can't tell you how many phone calls. I'm sure you've had them, and you're like, there's nothing we can do.
We have people buying practices trying to avoid that. And they're setting up a separate C Corp to do a stock purchase instead of an asset purchase of the business, so that they can keep the same tax ID number of that business. And I'm like, it's just a matter of time before they figure out that things have changed hands, and they're not going to keep those same reimbursement rates. It's in the contract.
It actually is, yes.
And so, it is. It's a total pain in the entire industry, and I don't know if or when or how it'll be solved, but.
Well,
that makes the work that we all do, I guess, that much more valuable,
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that, I talk about. I just did a educational session on the top 3 issues that are facing the industry. And then it's kind of continuing. I've never seen, usually, in the insurance world in particular, moves with glacier-like quickness. The evolution and changes that have happened that people don't realize and that are about to happen are monumental. And I'm baffled at how folks don't see this and they're not paying attention. I really am. Like, this is your business. This is your livelihood. This is your industry. You need to kind of keep your eye on what's going on. You need to connect the dots sometimes, or even if it's boring. Like, I don't like credentialing either, but I need to know exactly what's going on with it. And by the way, I read the contracts, so, I could probably count on one hand the number of clients that I've talked to that claimed that they did. I'm like, oh, they're like, well, how can they do that? I'm like, it's in the contract. Well, what about that? It's in the contract. You agreed to it. but they're evil. No, it's not. That you said that was fine. It's in the contract. Did you read the contract? No. Okay. And so, as with anything in life, I think that you just kind of got to pay attention. Not everybody is your friend. They may say that they're dental related. They may say that they want to bring smiles to the universe. They may say all kinds of stuff, but you have to look at the track record of the behavior, and you also have to look at what's going on with reimbursements as a whole. So the three biggest issues right now, just for the record and for all the listeners that I won't expand on, are the labor shortage, right, which is happening to the provider community too. Hutan Shahidi was on a show recently. We were talking about his problem. Are you seeing it?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. I've got you should check my inbox right now.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm getting sent messages and they're saying, we know you can't solve this. We know this is a problem everywhere, but just want to get your take on it. And I'm like,
what is your take?
My take is, we went through the storm and this is a byproduct of the storm, and, take a little bit of time to clean up. But, I think that businesses in general, whether they're dental practices or not, the ones that had a great employee culture and that felt like this business has my back and I have their back, they're not having this problem as badly. But for those businesses who do not focus on culture, and I would say that's the majority, are you just another job? Are you a dime a dozen? Can I leave somewhere to go get paid 50 cents more an hour? Would I do that to you? Or would I come to you and ask for that raise? I think that has to do with your culture and how you treat your people. And it was a major test. It was we look at it as like a great lab experiment. What happened at the beginning of COVID with every employer having to lay off their employees, and how they handled that, and how much did they communicate to them while they were laid off. I mean, all of that has had an impact on employee turnover.
That you're right. That is interesting. The whole COVID thing, from an intellectual perspective, I don't want to go through it again. Don't get me wrong, but from an intellectual perspective, I never thought about that. I never asked, hey, what
the financial component is only a small component of it, meaning the comment that people were making more money sitting at home on unemployment. Why would they go back to work? Well, that comes to an end at some point, but that was just a small component. It's the culture, it's that's not a financial or like a tangible thing. That's something that you build over time.
Sure.
And
do they believe in the mission? Do you talk to them? Do you say good morning? It can be really small things sometimes, but
do they trust you? I mean, is it a family? Is it, the practices that were having a culture problem or having employee problems before COVID, or the ones that are having it right now, most of them had these problems before COVID.
Yeah, I agree. That's really good stuff. That's really good insight. 1 second. Okay. Got a few more minutes. John Ray, he's good at counting. He's got his abacus out over there. So the culture coming back and the purpose, and this is kind of a theme that I'm a firm believer in the gospel. I'm pretty simple. I like to keep things real simple, but people need a purpose, right? Mm-hmm. They need to. And so your team, and what folks don't realize, like, that's an extension of you. That's your family. And that's what sometimes as a business owner, and I'm sure you understand. And, do you have kids?
I have 3 kids.
You have 3 kids, right? So I have 2. God bless you. I win. But taking care of my team is the same. It's like the same thing. I'm responsible. So I have to think about that all the time in all the decisions that are made, in moves that are made. And so, when the storm came, what I would tell people, I'm like, look, I've never seen this. You've never seen this. It's happened before, but not to anybody that's alive and not in this type of, global economy. But rolling with the punches, I can roll with the punches. Right. And then, so we just need to recalibrate, and hopefully they had some good advisors like we did. And, you need to save for a rainy day, because guess what, boys and girls, last year it rained, and, it's like, we didn't have to let it, we kept all our folks. So, I didn't go through that, but I never even thought about, okay, well, if you're letting all these people go, essentially, then how are you going to communicate with them? So you're right. That is an experience. So tell me just briefly, like, what are the top 3 things that the more proactive docs did that, in your opinion, would epitomize culture and purpose for all of their team?
Well, so, I mean, I think the debate of, is it patient first or team first, was laid to rest because of COVID. There was always that debate, who comes first? Are we focused on patients first or team first? And now, without your team, I mean, the patients, they came back, and there's, pent up demand and all of that, but without the team there to serve them, you got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's team first, and patients or clients right after that. And that's now I think that debate should be over. Secondly, I'm hit on the comment about, she had that rainy day savings. So I think in our personal lives, we've all learned that, it's maybe foundational, financial advice that you should keep 3 to 6 months of emergency money, in a rainy day savings. And now I think the 3-month might be eliminated. Everybody needs to have 6 months. But on the business side, why should it be any different? And before we started our firm, I did some consulting with, DSOs and practice brokers and some lenders. On the lender side, I asked them, I said, we want to create these financials, have some metrics. One of the metrics I wanted to have in there was a cash position, because I wanted to have them bank ready. I said, what do you guys look for in a cash position? And pre-COVID for dentistry, the number they gave me was 1.5 months expenses, 1.5 months expenses. And I said, that's it? Why is it so low? And they said, we wish we saw more dental practices that had that. So most dental practices didn't have 90 days of expenses in cash. Dentistry was very debt heavy and cash poor. And that has got to be a learning experience and a change, that they should have a minimum of 3, if not working towards 6 months of cash in their business for those emergency purposes. But people get it. They have this itch. They don't like to have all that cash. They want to put the money to work for them. But that's kind of like the floor. That's like,
right.
Yeah, like that's like your 0 point,
This is one of the things, and that's fascinating to me, that for me, I'm like, that's like basic blocking, tackling. That is not, or doesn't seem to be common knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's surprising. To me.
Look, because your brain and my brain are thinking risk management.
Mm-hmm. So you've had to have a lot of come to Jesus meetings, basically.
Yeah. And I'm like, look, hey, you got your PPP money. It got forgiven. You didn't have to pay taxes on it. Don't screw this up. It doesn't mean you just go and take all that money home. You need to leave it in the business, and it's off the table. You still got to go out and generate new money. That is there for, like, we got a handout twice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything left to get a third one. And you're on your own.
That's why they're coming after your 1099 contractors.
We will thin the herd if it happens again. And those that have cash, they did not panic. They did not have to lay off as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they had a plan to talk to their employees and say, "I'm okay. I'm going to take care of you." Instead of saying, "I don't know what we're going to do. I'm panicking. The ship's sinking, and I got to lay all of you off." Well, everybody had to lay everybody off, but how did they do it?
Mm-hmm.
And were they able to do anything special? The practices I'm thinking of right now that had a great culture, that kept their best people, they had employees that their refrigerator stopped working at home,
mm-hmm.
and their food was spoiling, and they didn't have any income before unemployment kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
And the practice owner had cash and paid cash and sent them a new fridge to their house. they stayed with the practice.
Right.
Right. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I love that.
So that cash is not just there to cover the costs of the business, but above and beyond that, like how people stay with you, or people, there's a saying of people buy differences. How are you different than the practice down the street? An accountant is an accountant is an accountant is an accountant. A dentist is a dentist is a dentist is a dentist. How are you different?
Mm-hmm.
And it's culture. It's how you treat people, your team. My greatest fear in running our business, because of my lack of experience in that accounting industry and how the people in that business work, I'm constantly asking my people, are you happy? What was it like when you worked at a different accounting firm? And I mean, you hear these nightmare stories, and they're like, you guys are the nicest bosses and all that. And I'm like shocked. I'm happy, because that's the thing we're constantly focusing on, is how do we invest in these people?
Amen, brother. I like that. I think that is where we're going to end it. Dear listeners, I think you should ponder that. What makes you different? So Chris Sands continues to raise and educate his profile, and you have like a little studio. How do people find you if they want to access some more of Chris Sands and the Profi 2020 team knowledge? How do they do that?
So website, Profi 2020, PROFI2020.com. We have a great YouTube channel now that we are putting out a lot more content. So just look up Profi 2020 on YouTube. You'll find us. We're on all the major social media. We post tips. People can reach out to us for a free consult. We don't charge anything for first time advice to see if we can help you. And every now and then we get questions that come through our, info@profi2020.com. And we're happy to answer those questions, in order to hopefully earn your business. But, don't be a stranger. Give us a call, send us an email, message us on social media. We try to be everywhere. We're trying to be the accounting firm that communicates. And, that was a big deal, during that COVID lockdown. That's really all we did. For 2 or 3 months, we did not take on any new clients. We spoke with all people that weren't our clients, and we said, we're here to serve and help the industry. And that's paid dividends. So that doesn't change after post-COVID,
I think it's, at least for me, I have a newfound appreciation and gratefulness for kind of small things. I never thought I would want to get back and do business travel again. And now I'm like, I am ready. But also just kind of grateful for, the people, and among other things. I'll save that for another day. I really appreciate you being on the show, Chris.
This was awesome. I hope we can do it again soon.
I do. And so listeners, again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Practice Quotient. Please let them know that you like the show. Email them at info@practicequotient.com and say Dental Business Radio is awesome. Or if you call them at 470-592-1680 when they ask how you heard about it, because there's not a sales team, and the firm is 100% referral based. So you have to say how you heard about us, because it's usually a current client. You say Dental Business Radio, do myself and John Ray a favor and say, hey, Dental Business Radio, great job. That's how I heard about it. And we do consults, and we're not able to do them at the same price, Chris, but we usually charge, or they usually charge $395 for them. It takes a lot of time and labor. We got to look at your data. We got to pay for our people. And if you mention Dental Business Radio, it'll be half off. So just mention that and you'll get half off of a consult, should that be appropriate for your needs. But if we know that we can't help you, we tell you that right away too. So, practicequotient.com, that's practice and then quotient if you don't know how to spell it. It's QUOT as in Tom, IEN as in Nancy, T as in Tom. Practice Quotient. I am your host, Patrick O'Rourke. We'll be at the Georgia Dental Association in Amelia Island next week. So if you're there, please come by and say hello. I'm speaking on Thursday, and we have the GAHU Annual Benefits Forum in Atlanta. And there are some other speaking engagements that I can't remember right this second. So until next time,